One, two, three. Okay. Hello, welcome to another episode of Silk and Steel Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Zah. Today we have a very special guest for you guys. I was challenged by Isobel Cockerelle from my CodaStory interview. She asked me, why did I not speak to Uyghur in exile? So I extended my invitation both on her interview and on Twitter. I said that I would welcome any voices from Uyghur in exile to appear on my show, and Arslan Hidayat agree to come to my show. So welcome, Arslan.
Hi, Carl. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's good. It's good that we're doing this because what we're doing right now is very rare.
Yes. So I know about you. I became aware of you, Arslan, on Twitter. I noticed you tweet a lot of Chinese TikTok videos where you present them as evidence documenting allegation of Chinese abuse, right? So that's how I got to know you. But can you tell my audience a little bit about yourself? What is your background? How did you? That is my puppies. They start fighting. I apologize for that. Could you tell us a little bit about your own background? How did you come? How did you come to Uyghur activism, etc.? Just to give us like an overview of who you are, what you do.
Yeah. So my name is Arslan Hidayat. I'm the General Secretary at the Uyghur Revival Association. Born and raised in Australia, I'm an Australian. I'm ethnically Uyghur. So since I was born, my parents would take me to what you refer to as Xinjiang, but we refer to as East Turkestan, every 3 or 4 years, and we would stay there for 4, 5, 6 months. So I'm very familiar with the area. I eventually married from there, and the last time I was there was at the end of 2014. I started activism not as public as now, but after the Urumqi riots. I attended a couple of protests, eventually started a small organization in Sydney, but after some of my family were approached by the CCP officials telling me not to continue, otherwise they'd be put in harm, I kind of went back into my cocoon and stopped after 2009. And I was obviously going back to and fro, and my wife's family, they're quite famous. My father-in-law, when he was taken to one of these camps at the end of 2018 in November, one day after my second daughter was born, that is when I went public using my name, showing my face, trying to get him free. And yeah, that's how it started. And I now run a Facebook page called Talk East Turkestan, which we have about 70,000 followers. It's the most popular page in the English language, shedding light on the Uyghurs' plight, and about 30,000 on Twitter, so about 100,000 followers. So yeah, that's kind of my background. I myself, I trained high school music teacher, but I'm currently teaching English in the Middle East, in Bahrain. So yeah, that's me.
Oh, so you mentioned you were born in Australia. Do you speak Uyghur or Chinese?
Yes.
Okay.
I speak Uyghur fluently. I understand more Chinese than speak it, but yeah.
Okay. And do you mention that your extended family is still back in China? Is that through your wife's side or your parents' side also?
So both sides. So my wife's family is there, and my own. So my parents are in Australia, but my aunts and aunties and uncles and cousins, they're all still there.
So have you been in touch with your extended side of family up till today, or was
So
there?
I haven't been able to contact my own family for a good 3 years.
Okay.
And as I mentioned, my father-in-law was in the camps for 10 months. He was released last year in September. And since his release, it's been about 11 months. and he hasn't been able to contact us. This is a man that normally travels, and he's also a very famous actor and comedian in China. In the mid 80s, he studied at the Xinjiang, which is like an acting school in Beijing. He studied in the same building as Peng Liyuan, which is Xi Jinping's wife.
Yeah.
He's very well known. Just Google or YouTube his name. Everyone knows him. And
What's his name?
Adil Mijit, ADIL
Okay.
space MIJIT.
Okay.
And and he has no passport. We can't contact him. He can't come over. His wife, his daughter, his son, his grandchildren are all here in Turkey, and he can't come.
Okay. What does he was he given a reason? What was his charge? What's he been charged with?
Nothing. No reason
Okay.
to this day. No charge. No nothing. And
Okay.
this is someone that he worked at the Xinjiang Theatre and Opera Troupe, which is a government body, for more than 30 years, I believe close to 35 years. And yeah, this is someone that was loyal to the CCP, and he was sent to a camp, no reason.
Do you think, his detention, would that have anything to do with your activism? Did you think
No,
maybe that? No.
no. Because I was not active. I mean, I would do bits and pieces. I would translate for refugees. I would, you know, follow the news, but I wasn't active at all. I would even be scared to post things just so that it doesn't affect my family back home. But a lot of Uyghurs, not just myself, came to a realization that regardless of whether you were active or not, positively, going against the Chinese government or not, you were being locked up. I know families that their whole family was so loyal to the government. You had people retiring after giving 40 years of their life to the CCP, and even they were locked up after retirement. And so, just speaking from personal experience, that we have someone that right now we would love to have him next to us, and we can't even make a simple phone call to him.
What would happen like if you try to reach out on WeChat?
So he's blocked me from WeChat, and I have reached out to him on WeChat,
Oh,
and
he blocked you. Okay.
he blocked me.
Do you think maybe he's trying to protect himself by blocking you?
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely,
Okay. So,
yeah.
but you know that he's been released right now
Yeah.
inside China. What
Yeah.
what do you think is a reason though? For somebody like him that the Chinese government detained him for 10 months. What do you think the Chinese government motivation is for detaining him?
So we believe the detainment is arbitrary because he has committed no crime, and the only reason it could be because they are catching or arresting Uyghurs simply because they are Uyghur, and it has nothing to do with religion. I mean, the religion plays a big part in the Uyghur culture because they're so infused, but there are people that practice Islam, or they used to wear the headscarf and they were taken in because of their beard. And I myself, the last few times I went after 2009, I was told by friends and family to walk in across the border, even though I've never held Chinese citizenship and I'm a total foreigner. They told me to shave off my beard, and I
This is
didn't ask why.
this is when
Yeah,
you went to Xinjiang last
yeah,
few years ago. Okay, this
yeah.
was back in 2014.
2014, yeah. They're like, and because what's happened is, that any foreigners that end up going anywhere in China, you either got to be registered at a hotel, or
Yeah.
you are registered with a family member that you stay, and they didn't want to be targeted because they've got a foreigner in their home, but number two, they've got a practicing person with a beard.
Hmm.
That's like a big no-no. So
So
even and that's nothing compared to what's being written in the reports, but
sure.
just that little something tells you that, oh, there's something going on.
Who asked you to shave your beard?
I can't say. I don't want to say.
Oh, but
Yeah,
was it? My question is it your family or is it the Chinese government?
the family member.
Oh, okay, okay. So
Yeah,
they don't want to get in trouble by been associated with you, and they okay. So it wasn't a request from the Chinese police visiting you,
No.
asking you to shave your beard. Okay.
Yeah. But they realize that they will get in trouble either when I'm there because they can't affect it doesn't affect me. They will get in trouble.
Okay.
So and this is the feeling that they had. And and me not being able to say their name, that also says something about how serious this is. That's if people buy it, because people are very skeptical. Arslan's just lying. But yeah.
But what do you think? What do you think the Chinese government is trying to do by arbitrarily detaining anyone who is Uyghur? Like, what do they get out of it? What they're trying to achieve?
So the Uyghurs are one of the, if not the only sort of group within China that haven't totally assimilated into Chinese society the way that the CCP wants. And our culture and our religion play a big part in that. So we believe that they are trying to get rid of the Islam in the Uyghurs. They're trying to get rid of the culture so that we are left with a person that looks like a Uyghur, but has Han Chinese or CCP values. This is what we believe.
Okay. What do you consider to be like Han Chinese value or CCP value versus like the Uyghur values?
So, for example, religion plays a big part in our lives. We want to pray. We want to have a beard. Not we, but generally, people should be able to live how they want, eat what they want, marry who they want, fast if they want, practice religion, go to the mosque if they want. So, instead of calling it maybe Uyghur culture, people want to live freely,
Sure.
whether it be Uyghur. So I personally wouldn't mind if a Uyghur wanted to act more Han Chinese, decided for himself or herself not to speak the Uyghur language, but to do it in a free manner.
Right. But
Yeah.
your father-in-law, was he practicing Muslim? Was he
Yes.
so did he wear a beard? Did he, like
No,
a
he wouldn't. Uh, he would have a mustache, but that's also gone because the beard is not obligatory. Based on what certain scholars, that's an opinion within Islam. Some say it is obligatory, but it's not obligatory for you to have a beard. But a lot of Uyghurs I know that wanted a beard but wouldn't because they knew they would be targeted. And number two, he was working in a government. He was, a government, even though he's an actor, you and I know that, singers, actors, performers, they're linked to government bodies one way or another, and they are not allowed to portray Islam. And even the women, uh, it's not like Islam was always banned. The women would wear, especially dancers, they would have the headscarf, and
Mhm.
just before they went into the government building, they would all take it off.
Mm.
So yeah,
What? So, but from your description to me, it sounds like your father-in-law is pretty well integrated into like the Chinese society, right?
yeah,
So
exactly.
he doesn't sound like one of the Uyghurs that government would be targeting for not assimilating to Chinese society, right? So that is my question. What do you think the government motivation is for targeting people like him? Like,
So the Uyghurs have always been targeted. It's not only the 3 years. We say the Uyghurs have always been targeted since the invasion. We call it the invasion by the Communist Party in 1949. China would only target certain groups of people. So someone like my father-in-law who's worked for the CCP, they were basically last on the list. So we would see Uyghurs being oppressed, or they would see Uyghurs being oppressed for praying, for having hijab, for covering their faces, for having too many children. But they would not speak up against it because they thought, you know what, I'm a government official. I know the Chinese language. Some of these people that have been detained, footballers, university professors, singers, doctors, people that, how can you become a doctor in East Turkestan if you don't know Chinese Mandarin, or a lawyer? So these people are very educated people, um, you know, elites of the society, and examples for everyone. But China have now come to a stage where even these people, like the amount of assimilation that has occurred with the likes of my father-in-law, even that's not enough. We
But
need to be
what
more
I
assimilated.
mean is, what is China trying to achieve by detaining somebody like your father-in-law, who is well assimilated, who knows Chinese, who is part of the system, work for the CCP. What is the end goal? What do you think the end goal of the Chinese government is by targeting these well-educated people, well-educated,
It's
well-assimilated?
Yeah, so there are many ways to interpret it. He is an influencer, he's an elite of the society, and it's a message to everyone that, you know what, no matter how far you go up within, even in CCP ranks, that you are a Uyghur, and any essence of religiosity or Uyghurness coming out of you, now we are at a stage where even that will be filtered. So this is a message to everyone that any inkling that you show Uyghur pride or Islamic pride, we will clamp down on this, because he was a very moderate Muslim, practicing 5 times a day, going to the mosque, breaking no laws, and practicing religion according to Chinese constitution. You're allowed to do this, but he never ever went to extremes, and things like this. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, it sounds like people like your father-in-law would be held up as example, right, by the
Yeah.
Chinese state as how, Uyghur would behave, how they would expect Uyghur to be like model citizens, right?
Yeah.
But why do you think Chinese government is trying to achieve by targeting model citizens like himself, like they're literally what the Chinese state probably wish Uyghur would be, right? And
Yeah.
law-abiding, moderate, speaking Chinese, part of the system. By taking them, putting in detention, and what does that gain the Chinese government? I mean, I'm trying to make a logical conclusion,
Yeah.
right? We're trying to understand what do you think that is? What they're trying
So
to.
the the Chinese do not like the other. This is our, I mean, the Communist Party do not like the other. And even though the likes of my father-in-law, as you mentioned, the way that I've described is very much assimilated, that
Mhm.
was still very different for them. They don't like difference. This
Okay.
is what I'm saying. So even Islam, even the religion of Islam is not practiced freely, and the sort of Islam that they want is not the same as you would find everywhere else in the world. They want a communistic version of Islam. That you are not allowed to speak everything it's not practiced or spoken freely.
What I'm not a religious scholar, but
Yeah.
I don't understand how could it be like a communist version of Islam. Like I'm having a hard time understanding that. Can you elucidate and expand
So
on
so
that?
so,
What
so
is?
for, so for example, Uyghurs do not eat pork. Uyghurs
Mhm.
do not drink alcohol. I mean, no,
Sure.
I'm just like a practicing Uyghur who chooses to follow Islam
Hmm.
would not eat pork, would not
Sure.
drink alcohol.
Sure.
And would you agree that if someone that chooses not to drink pork, not to eat pork or drink alcohol, you would allow them to do that?
Yeah, of course.
I'm just talking about basic stuff here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that's. I mean, like I think that's a given, right? I mean, like if you're
Yeah,
a Muslim, you would
yeah.
not eat pork, you would not drink alcohol. If you're
Or
a
or
practice.
even saying like, Muslims eat with their right hand. If I see someone smoking, I'm gonna go, brother, you know what? Smoking's harmful for you, right? And I would even mention the word of Islam. So things like this is the other. This is what I'm talking about. It seems reasonable, but for a communistic level, right, that's too different. Why are you telling a person not to eat pork? Or why is a person choosing not to eat pork? That's too different for us. This is what I'm saying.
I mean,
Even though that's very difficult to fathom, this is the level that it's taken it to.
so do you think your dad was taking into the camp because he he refused to eat pork, or he refused to eat pork, or he refused to drink alcohol? I mean, is that the reason?
To this day, I can only speak about the answer or no answer the Chinese Communist Party has given us. And to
Mm-hmm.
this day, we have no reason why as to why
Okay.
he was sent in the camps. Nothing
Right.
official.
Right.
So I
But
don't know why.
can you
But
speculate,
but
like,
but
what
if
is?
I were to go with this narrative, I
Mhm.
would assume that because he prayed, he didn't eat pork, he acted, like a regular Muslim anywhere else in the world would. This could be the reason he went into the camps.
Okay. So what do you think the end goal of Chinese government is? Like by putting these people in camp for like 10, lock them for 10, 11 months and release them, what is Chinese government trying to achieve? I mean, I'm like, they're apparently going through a lot of trouble, a lot of effort to do this, right? To put up a massive program to do something like that. What do you think they're trying to achieve? I mean, they're putting a lot of energy into this project.
To be honest, that they want to get rid of the Uyghurness or Uyghur pride. Like they want Uyghurs, even though they physically don't look Chinese, to totally assimilate. So, like I'm saying, if even so, a Uyghur simply wanting to eat, I'm talking about very simple things, and it may be difficult for your audience to understand. Someone that wants to eat with their right hand, or someone that wants to cover their head, that this is very different from China. It's not part of the broader Chinese society, and we say the that difference, that difference, they want to get rid of that difference, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. But I mean, from your description, it sounds like your dad is not really different. He's not that different. I mean,
Exactly.
he's
Exactly.
already assimilated. He's already part of
Exactly.
the system, right? So if he's
Exactly.
already part of the system, what is to be achieved by detaining a person like him?
Well, so as you said, someone like my father-in-law, and there are many others in my boat whose parents or they were like thriving in their own career, millionaires, uh, you know, footballers, sports stars. These guys were the elites of society, and people look up to them. And so when the people, and even the people, when they look up to these people, these guys are supposed to be the model citizens
Yeah,
amongst the Uyghurs for China.
yeah.
Even that's not enough. You've got to even be more Sinified or more Hanified or more assimilated into China. This is the message that we get. I think this is the reason why this is being done.
Okay, I'm asking that question is
Are,
because
are,
I
are
could
you trying to take it
imagine.
somewhere or?
Because I could imagine if somebody get detained for 10 months for no reason, they
Yeah.
probably wouldn't be very happy about it when they get out, right? So I mean, my personal experience, my grandfather, my grandfather on my mother's side, he was during 1956 during the anti-rightist campaign. So he was labeled a rightist, and he was put in the labor camp. And after he was released, he was very bitter. He was very bitter against the Communist Party. He used to support the Communist Party, back in during the Chinese Civil War era, during early 1950s. But after he was put in camp, after he was released, he was very bitter toward the communist policy. So I would imagine same thing would applies to your father-in-law too. Like, so that is my question: what would Chinese government uh, think they would achieve by making people who are well-adjusted part of the system feeling bitter and resentment? Because
Well,
that doesn't compete for me. That doesn't make
what
sense.
yeah, well, apparently what's happening in these camps, based on the witnesses that I've spoken to, is that the way that they were living, as I mentioned before, they weren't assimilated enough. And as I mentioned to you, those very normal practices, praying, not eating pork, not drinking alcohol, they had to repent to the CCP. And I believe my father-in-law did the very same thing, that he had to repent for the very moderate actions that he was doing each and every day. And he was not arrested before that because he was doing this for many years. So the question is, how come and I'm just speculating because to this day, the government hasn't told us what's the actual reason for his detainment. But if he was detained for those actions, that now he understands, and they probably have normalized that now, that, you know what, that's also not accepted. So I'm not sure what he's feeling because I can't contact him.
Sure.
And another thing about re-education, what school do you know of that, even if, let's just say the vocational schools of a man, I mean, he's 56 years old. He's got money. You know, he's worked as a government official for more than 30 years. What education does he need? And let's just say he did need education. What sort of education does not allow you to contact your family members? You know, we're living in the 21st century, right? Technology, 4G, 5G, right? While he's in education, and even after graduating from the education. What's this? How come he doesn't have a passport? How come he can't visit his family?
That's a part that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
That why would the Chinese government do that, and just to give him such kind of a reason to be bitter, to have resentment? Like, why do you think that is? I mean, I kind of understand what you're saying, is that you know, the Chinese government feel these people haven't been assimilated enough. But sounds to me, your father-in-law is very well adjusted. You know, he's by putting somebody like, so like, if we're talking about people in rural Xinjiang, where like you know, people have more conservative religious outlooks, I can understand, you know, maybe the Chinese government is fear of people getting influenced by religious fundamentalism. They, in their own mind, they thought they were doing a de-radicalization campaign. But in your father-in-law's case, that doesn't sounds like that's the case. And so if that's the case, what do you think Chinese? I mean, I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to get at. It's like, what it doesn't sound like all this serves any kind of purpose, right? To put your your father-in-law in detention.
Exactly. And you know what? You asking these questions, I think you've realized as well, what is the purpose? I mean, you asking me this, that's the only sort of answer I can give you, because the Uyghurs are peace-loving people. I mean, people were doing their own thing, making their money. I mean, there's people worse off than me. I mean, my father-in-law has been able to get out. I know people that you know, the whole family is like one person on the outside, not living in East Turkestan, and the whole family is gone. Mum, dad, but they can't contact them. Nothing. And even when they go to the Chinese consulate to ask, like, they give them their Shenfenzheng ID, everything, no answers. I mean, what are people to do? What is the end goal? Like, we believe it's to just get rid of the Uyghurs. I mean, like, keep them there. Some will die because of how they're treated. I mean, I'm not going to get into an argument of what the concentration camps are, because you're going to call them vocational, or, you know, there's a side we're going to argue over, you know, people are being educated, and I'm not going to say no, they're being tortured, and then it's going to end. But I just want to talk about some experiences, you know what I mean? So the experience on our end, it doesn't make sense. And the people, like, we got university professors, you know, and some of these people that you talk to, if you ask them, say, what Islam was, they wouldn't give an answer, because they themselves don't know, because it's just so infused in their society that, you know what I mean? Like, there's the Uyghurs are loving people, following the law of the land as much as they can, but we too don't know as to why someone like my father-in-law and others are locked up.
Do you believe like Uyghurs can have a future inside China?
Not in its current state. And we've realized that, I mean, as I mentioned, the concentration camps are the most recent event. There is a culling of Uyghurs every 10 or so years. So for example, most recently in 1990, there's a Baran massacre. You can look that up, where people opposed the family planning, two-child policy. 1997, the Gulja massacre. 2009, the Urumqi massacre or riots. Depending on what side you're from, you're either going to call them protests or riots versus massacre, where thousands died. So there is a softening and hardening of policies every once in a while. And, the Uyghurs, by and large, follow the law, Chinese law, but we've come to understand that without ourselves, I mean, we are technically called the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, but there's nothing autonomous about it. And if true autonomy was given in 1955, there would be no independence movement, or there would be no need to want to separate from China.
Okay, so but there are Uyghur celebrities in China, right? I'm sure you're aware of them.
Yeah.
There's Dilraba Dimuraj, or in Chinese, Dili Zeba. She's one of the most popular Uyghur actress in China. I think I look up her Weibo. She has like 72 million followers, right? And I know even people outside of China, like I'm in Bali right now. I know people in Indonesia knows about her because they watch Chinese dramas. What do you think about people like that?
Well, at any given time, they too could be taken. Another thing, they will keep some on the outside for publicity, so that you could use that argument against me. What about her? Was she taken in the camps? So right now, you, Carl, are serving that purpose. And to be honest, forget Uyghurs. I mean, let's just say, would you be able to interview a Uyghur within China's borders like this and post it online?
Well,
I mean, even just like, be honest now, slight criticism of the government. And would any Uyghur accept your interview? Be honest.
I'm
someone.
I'm not sure they would accept to be on camera. I mean, in private maybe, like in WeChat. Not like open talk. Of course, like certain topics will be off topic about independence, stuff like that. But talking about everyday life, sure, like I have been in WeChat groups with Uyghurs, and they talk about what's going on, like everyday life inside Xinjiang. We it's understood certain topic will be taboo, of course, like independence, etc.
No, but you understand what I mean, don't you?
Sure.
So, for example,
there's censorship, no doubt. I mean, inside China, there's censorship. I experienced censorship firsthand. I had a Weibo account with 5 million followers inside China, and there are certain topics that's taboo, because I would notice my post would be censored. Like nobody will. You will be hidden. After I posted for a while, they suddenly lock it down, and nobody can comment on it anymore. Nobody can even see it. And I do notice certain topics, relating to Uyghur and Xinjiang is sensitive. Sometimes I would post a joke about the security situation. There was a joke. That they said a Uyghur girl. I saw this on a Uyghur forum. One of the jokes that she shared was, "Yeah, I can't. I need to renew my internet fee. I couldn't, but I don't know my dad's ID. I don't have my dad's ID number. So I just went to the kitchen and grabbed a knife." Because in Xinjiang, every knife they have a QR code, right, associated with with your ID and everything. So it was a joke. So that was a joke, and I posted that joke on my Weibo, and I didn't notice after a while that that post got disabled. It was cannot be freely shared anymore. So I do know there's restrictions. I know there's censorship, but what I am. But what I'm hearing on the other hand is like very unbelievable account, like 1 million Uyghur has been put into concentration camp, right? I mean, I understand that I never deny there's existence re-education camp. Chinese government even admit there's re-education camp, but I just find the scale a little bit unbelievable. Like the figure, the 1 million Uyghur in concentration camp. So I did a little bit of research on myself. I found out that there's two primary source for the claim. One is from the China Human Rights Defenders, which is a NGO supported by National Endowment for Democracy in Washington. And they base their estimate from interview with 8 Uyghurs in 8 villages around southern Kashgar. And based on the interviews, they extrapolate the sample size to the entire Uyghur population in Xinjiang, which they take in 11 million Uyghur, they're assuming 10% incarceration rate, so 1 million Uyghur in concentration camp. That's how they arrive at their number. And then there's another report by a German researcher for a victim of communism, Adrian Zenz, and he based his estimate on a leaked document from a Uyghur exile group in Turkey. And from that leaked document, he also did an extrapolation to the whole Xinjiang population. Based on, also he presented a lot of satellite informations, because there have been, I know from ASPI, a think tank group in Australia. You're Australian, so you're probably more familiar with them. So ASPI, they did a lot of satellite intelligence analysis of different camps. But even Adrian Zenz, in his report, he admit it's an estimate. He said there's no way, impossible to know the actual numbers, but he thinks it's not unreasonable to assume 1 million Uyghur figure. So that's the two primary source being cited by all the Western media. To me, I'm a little bit skeptical because first of all, both Adrian Zenz and China Human Rights Defenders are funded by Washington. Both organizations are funded either by National Endowment for Democracy or by more directly by U.S. State Department, because Adrian Zenz worked for German Marshall Fund and Victim of Communism. Both of them funded directly by U.S. government. And I have a natural skepticism about anything that put out by the U.S. government, because I from experience, I witnessed what happened in the lead up to the Iraq War, to the Gulf War, to the intervention in Libya. We were told certain things. We were told Iraqi soldiers were throwing Kuwaiti babies from incubators. We were told that there's weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. We were told that Gaddafi was handing out Viagra to a soldier to commit mass rape. So that's why we need to intervene. But all these claims has been proven to be bogus. But after the fact, after the intervention already happened, after millions of Iraqi citizens have died, after Libya, fall into civil war and it's still not resolving. So I'm especially in today's environment, when United States government is engaging to launch a new Cold War against China. So I color me a little bit skeptical by some of these wilder claims coming out of China. I mean, I believe there's racial profiling. I know it's very hard for Uyghur people who travel to other parts of China to get hotel rooms to rent a place, because they're required to register with the police. And I know a lot of people, in a lot of cases, the hotel wouldn't even bother checking them in because they just don't want to deal with the police, so they just deny them service. And because China doesn't really have discrimination law like U.S., there's really no recourse for the Uyghur customer who have been denied service to even sue them in a civil court. So I understand that. I understand there's racial profiling. I understand there's discrimination. But some of the wilder claims, like for example, the halal organ, the organ harvesting of the Uyghur and selling them to wealthy customers in Gulf countries, I find that personally a little bit hard to believe.
So back to the camps. Besides Adrian Zen's, there was Sean Zhang's blog, and it's got all the coordinates. I don't know about Sean Zhang, but all of the coordinates that were found, there's 500, if not more, camps. So based on the sizes of the camps and I believe it was the amount of beds sold or the beds delivered, bed sheets, the equipment that was needed. So this was all found on Chinese websites, like open source. So a lot of the information was based around that. But right now, we could, and I totally agree with you. I'm one of those people that say, America are hypocrites when it comes to what's happening to the Uyghurs, because, as you've mentioned, they've bombed and they've taken many Muslim majority countries back into the Stone Age, and I totally agree with you. People are very skeptical when how can a country that destroys Muslim countries, and then you've also got these Muslim majority countries supporting China. So I understand what makes people skeptical, but at the end of the day, from my part, if America was speaking about it or not, we'd still be on this. I would still be talking about it today, but the difference would be my voice wouldn't have been boosted because it is boosted by Western media, and you and I wouldn't be having this conversation right now. That's the only difference. The oppression does exist. And we can go into, I'm not going to say halal organ harvesting is true or not, or what that's true or not, because we're not going to come to an agreement. And you're right, a lot of the oppression that we're talking about is based on witness testimony. But I can only talk about my experiences and the experiences of others where, I mean, it's got to be really sus when your own family members cannot visit you and you cannot visit them. You cannot talk to them on WeChat. And just like these everyday basic things that we cannot get, you really got to give that to us. Regardless of whether the sterilizations are true or not, we simply cannot make a phone call, Carl. We cannot make a phone call.
Have you attempted to
Yes.
visit China?
Yes. I have not. I do not attempt to visit China, especially after now. And to be honest,
but you're Australian citizens, right? I mean, the Chinese government cannot touch you.
Well, these days they're locking up Canadians, aren't they? So I don't think my citizenship matters anymore. And to be honest, they could lay any crime on you and go, you know what, you did this crime, and how could I protect myself? And to be honest, if we were in China right now and we were talking about this and you posted this and I'm still in China, like, would you post it? Like, what would this stay up on the internet? Like, what is China hiding, and why? And obviously China does let people in, but they're not allowed to have independent investigation of the land, can they?
No, I'm not talking about investigation. I'm just talking about you visiting your family. You go to China to visit your family.
One, even if they didn't touch me, I would be putting my family at risk because they'd be harboring a separatist.
Because of your high-profile social media presence. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair. So let's talk about your social media posting, because you are very prolific. You post a lot, and many of them have gone viral. So how do you go about gathering these evidence of abuse and then posting them before you posting them on Twitter?
So I will admit that I only started using Twitter at the beginning of 2019, and I will admit, due to my inexperience and due to emotion, I posted some things without verification, and they were wrong. And now I am more careful. I've taken courses into how to verify things and backtrack. And unless the way I post, the language that I use when I post now is a lot different than what I used to do. I used to be like absolutely a matter of fact, like, this person's Uyghur, this baby is crying because her parents, and I know the mistakes that I've made, and I'm willing to live up to that. And people like yourself are right in calling out that. And I now too call out on other Uyghurs who go, you know what? Have you verified that? Or even if you haven't verified that, could you use language like we assume, it looks like, it could be, to sort of, make it more reputable, I guess. And so, yeah, now I do go through a sort of verification process. I do try and go to doing accounts, what was the context behind the posting. But at the same time, the Uyghurs cannot openly, go, hey, the Chinese are killing us. They cannot say that within the borders. So we have to take some things like, there are some languages. So, for example, when Uyghurs are talking, they'll be like, I went to Dashur for 6 months. And that Dashur means literally like, I was in education. But we know that it's not simply education. And you see this person, university graduate, and they're back to running their business again, or they're back to getting their, you know what I mean? So you do have to, it's not like Syria, or it's not like Iraq, or it's not like other places where it's like in your face. So the way we post is definitely different. And I understand the skepticism, because the main country that's leading the cause is the United States, and they've got a really bad track record when it comes to Muslims. How come you're suddenly, because even I'm skeptical, where was Obama? Because like I'm saying, the oppression by the Chinese hasn't been happening since the concentration camps. It's been happening for, 70, 71 years. Where was Obama? Where was Bush? Where was Clinton on these issues? So, and why now? So I understand why that skepticism comes. And even many Muslims have questioned me, oh, look, it's America. Look at Israel. Look at the Zionists. How come they support you where they themselves are oppressing Palestinians? I get that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that the oppression is not true.
Okay, that's fair. But what about the level of oppression and the specific details, though? Because right now there's even a narrative, at least what I see in social media, that there's a current genocide going on in Xinjiang, and I have been on Twitter. I have been called a genocide denier for calling into question, either the number of Uyghurs in camps, or just questioning some of this Western media reporting. Do you think there's a genocide going on in Xinjiang, or as you call East Turkestan right now?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, and just before I got to you, I was having an interview with Dan Dumbrell, I think that's his name. And I'm willing to talk to voices like you. At the end of the day, no Uyghur organization or human rights organization is going to be able to give you hardcore proof of genocide. And, I'm just going to put that out there. But Adrian Zenz, with his report on the sterilization and birth control, I mean, this has been happening for many years. But he found, based on Chinese official owned family planning websites, government websites, he did statistics where the birth rate has been taken, just, barely zero, maybe slightly above zero. And then obviously the Chinese hit back, said, well, the overall since 1970, the Uyghur population has risen, but over the past 3 years, no. And the main reason a lot of these people were actually put into the camps was for having too many children. And at the end of the day, a lot of what we do is based on witness testimony. So I get that. But so I make the difference when it comes to, say, the Jewish Holocaust, where the only thing left from the Chinese side is putting the people mass into gas chambers. And it's not like a Rwanda situation or in Rohingya where people are just killed on the street in front. Like, that doesn't seem to be happening, even though we have heard reports where in the city or in the township of Yarkant that a massacre did take place, but still no hardcore evidence. There's only, some open source information, mobile phone apps, the iJob app, how Uyghurs are detained and how tightly they're secured. But when it comes to an actual physical genocide, we are basing a lot of this on witness testimonies, and we ourselves believe But when you're right in saying hardcore like footage or like whole towns disappearing, that evidence doesn't seem to be there, and that's really frustrating.
I mean, I'm not even talking about like hardcore evidence of like numbers wise. I'm just because if you are wiping out an entire ethnic group of people, there's in today's world we have eyes 3 miles in the sky. We have satellites. It's very hard to hide something like that. And speaking to the Adrian Zen's report, going back, I actually read his report. He has a set of graphs and data. Even from Adrian Zen's report, it shows that the Uyghur population has risen, from 1949 to the present. And even in the last 3 years, even since like 2017. And in fact, what it shows is in percentage of total population, it's the Han population of Xinjiang that has fallen from, it was 40% around 1980. But now, just in the last 3 years, the Han population of Xinjiang have fallen from 40% previously to about 36%. So people are leaving Xinjiang because maybe the security situation and the fear of attacks. And so it doesn't, at least in absolute numbers, the Uyghur population is growing, and also in the percentage of the population, the Uyghur percentage is going up, even in the last 3 years. And this is from Adrian Zen's report, because I actually read it.
Maybe we interpreted the statistics a little differently. I know that from post 2000 and no, after 1999, there was a growth because there was a big push for Chinese migrants to work in East Turkestan, and then that sort of fell in after the Urumqi riots because it wasn't that it was deemed to be not safe. But in the last 3 years, I would say the opposite, if I remember correctly. But you said, and it's pretty much the truth based on Chinese statistics. If I asked you what the Uyghur population was, and you said it earlier, 11 million, yes?
Yeah.
Yes, those are the current statistics, and it's said on CGTN. And wouldn't you agree that a Chinese spokesperson would comfortably not get that number incorrect? They would probably say 10 million, 11 million, or 12 million. They would say one of these numbers, correct?
Actually, I don't put any trust in Chinese spokesperson. The Chinese propaganda is shit. That I think both of us can agree. That the Chinese propaganda is shit, and many of the Chinese spokesperson, even for the Chinese government, are unprofessional, and they don't know how to present their story. They don't know how to present to the media. So in my show, Isobel Cockerelle for CodaStory, I made it clear I don't believe in the Chinese government media, but equally I don't believe the Western media either. I just don't think we should take whichever government says at face value. Whether Chinese government or United States government. And back to the report of Adrian Zenz, he has a chart. Inside the report, he presented a chart which you can see very clearly that the Uyghur population.
I hadn't finished what I said before.
Okay, go ahead.
I wanted to make a point there. So, so it's clear, according to Chinese statistics, it's 11 million people. Mm-hmm. But what was scary was back in 2018, September, on Al Jazeera, Victor Gao, I love Victor Gao, he's a funny guy. He, on Al Jazeera, said, because the question was posed, 1 million people, he acted very scared. How can we lock up, he said, how can we lock up 1 million people when there's only 6 to 7 million Uyghurs? Now, 6 to 7 million is a big difference for 9 million, 11 million. And that scared me. Like someone of his stature to say, to give a 40% drop like that, 45% drop, I'm thinking, man, did he just give some information away?
Okay, I can understand why you would be scared, right?
Yeah.
But I in this case, I believe he probably just misspoke. I mean, I have not, again, that's it's saying that half of the Uyghur population is gone. I mean, I haven't even seen that claim in Radio Free Asia. Like normally Radio Free Asia will come out with all kind of claim, but I haven't even seen, like 6 million Uyghur getting killed, even from channels like Radio Free Asia, right? So I think we can safely discount that it was a moment where he just misspoke. But okay, so let's switch track a little bit. Let's talk about how do you envision, your ideal war, you are for the establishment of East Turkestan. So what would be your ideal East Turkestan?
So my ideal East Turkestan would be a democratic, secular nation, encompassing not just today's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, which is about 1.6 million square kilometers. It would encompass also a bit of Gansu, which is an extra 200,000, so 1.8 million square kilometers, what we now know today as the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, and then some. It would be a place where people, if they wanted to practice or not practice religion, up to them, a place where you'd live freely. That would be my ideal nation, and especially in today's political landscape, that would be the most appropriate.
Actually, I heard something interesting. You said your East Turkestan would include a bit of Gansu. Why is that? Yep. Why a bit of Gansu?
Yeah, because that was the original setup of the last East Turkestan Republic back in 1944 to 49. That was part of East Turkestan.
But in 1944 to 1949, the second East Turkestan Republic, we're not talking about the first. The first Turkestan, East Turkestan is Islamic Republic only lasted 6 months, right? From 1933, November 1933 to April 1934. What you're talking about is the second East Turkestan Republic that was established with the help of Soviet Union in 1944. But that was only that government only kept the control of 3 northern districts, around the Yili Valley and the Altai, right? It's in the northern part of Xinjiang. They didn't even control whole of Xinjiang. I mean, they didn't even control Urumqi. There was a march of the East Turkestan army up to the capital Urumqi, but that was stopped at the Manas River, right? So it was a very limited geographic area, in the what today would be the Yili Kazakh prefecture and a couple regions in the Altai, right? Like the 3 districts. In the Chinese, they call it the 3-district revolution, right? The 3 districts, right? So how did Gansu get that's why I'm a little bit confused.
Yeah, so I'm not sure of what the political landscape or the history was there at the time, how much was in control or not in control, but the main narrative pushed by the independence movement outside is calling for the current land to be part of East Turkestan and an extra 200,000. Where that comes from, where the resources, I'm not a historian on that. You may want to talk to the reasons. I'll admit that I'm not knowledgeable on that issue.
Let's say all of that is now the new East Turkestan. Now, the state would not just include Uyghurs, as we mentioned earlier. The present population in Xinjiang is rather multi-ethnic. You have about 46% Uyghur, and then you have 36% Han population, and then you have around 9 to 10% Kazakhs, and then you have Kyrgyz, the Tajiks, Mongols, Hui, right? So with all these multi-ethnic elements, near half of it is non-Islamic, non-Muslim population. What is your vision? I mean, like, are these people allowed to stay? Are the Han Chinese allowed to stay in East Turkestan?
So the question I pose is that you are not, we have to admit that we see East Turkestan as occupied land, and any person who ended up in East Turkestan because they were allowed to through China's migration program in order to dissolve or take over the Uyghur population and make it really Chinese. I wouldn't call for, an eradication of Chinese people, but I think naturally Chinese people would leave the land. That's how I would. That's the nicest way I could put it.
Okay.
What happens on the ground, like violence and killing of innocent people, I don't call for at all. But I would imagine that those people would leave, and people could be, exiled. Could be exiled. I'm not a leader or anything, because we've seen this happen in history, and it's accepted that you came in during a time of occupation, and you were only able to come because the PLA were there. And we believe if the PLA left East Turkestan today, a lot of Chinese would automatically leave.
Some some Han Chinese would probably leave. But what if a sizable portion decide to stay? I mean, what would you do then? I mean, I can imagine some of them just decide, okay, that's it. It's not secure or safe for me here. I would just pack up and go join my relatives in other parts of China. But I could also imagine quite many Han Chinese who have put down roots in Xinjiang, who have been living there for the last 70 years. They want to stay. What would you, if you are the top leader, right, of the East Turkestan, what would you do?
Okay, so a lot of Uyghurs will not agree with me. Simply, for example, I call for a democratic, secular, government society there. I would imagine a lot of the Chinese would leave. But when it comes to politics, what happens on the ground may differ, and I wouldn't advocate for that. So, I don't know how I would answer that question.
Let me change it. Let me rephrase it. So let's suppose that 36% Han Chinese. Since it's going to be we're just a hypothetical situation. It's going to be a referendum, right? Everybody, one man, one vote. Now that 36% Han Chinese say, hey, we're going to vote for our parts of Xinjiang to join with China. It's like currently in the capital Urumqi, for example, is a Han majority city, right? It's over 75% Han Chinese in Urumqi. Let's say the Han Chinese in Urumqi said, hey, we're going to just vote to remain part of China, right? So what do you do then? I mean, like when in that situation?
Well, the one thing here is we would say, do the Chinese even have the right to vote? I mean, the Uyghurs and the other Turkic minorities have been there for thousands of years. We say we are the original inhabitants of the land. Now, I understand your question, and this argument has been made in Uyghur circles, and to be honest, no Uyghur has given a clear answer. There are Uyghurs out there that do give an extreme answer, and you can guess what that extreme answer is. I don't call for that. So my opinion based on the referendum is that the Chinese would not have the right to take part in that referendum because they are not East Turkestani.
Now, what about the Hui Muslims?
Well, again, the nation will be based on. There are various ideologies within Uyghur circles. So one, there is a group that calls for an East Turkestan. There is a group that calls for a Uyghuristan, which means like the Uyghurs would be in power, and those that secede or say bow down to the Uyghuristan government could live there freely. But as regards to a referendum, I personally do not see a dissolvement like what happened with the USSR and suddenly all these Turkic nations became free. I don't see that happening. I do see things happening like going some sort of Western military intervention, just like what happened with Germany, that they had to go in and save the Jews. I think that's what's going to happen.
You're
But
thinking about something like maybe Kosovo or Bosnia, where NATO
yeah,
intervene
yeah,
and
it's,
the NATO post troops to a peacekeeping force, like a
yeah,
UN peacekeeping force.
some
Okay.
something like this. Yeah.
So, but then you're also equally aware, the breakup of Yugoslavia was very bloody, right? I mean, the different ethnic group start fighting each other, the Serbs and Croats and the Bosniak Muslims. I'm that could, if you look at the ethnic makeup of Xinjiang currently, right? We do have this ethnic divide, either between the Han and the Uyghur, and also the Muslims and non-Muslims. So what if it becomes, like a Bosnia situation, right? When a breakup lead to civil war. I mean, like, do you even envision that?
So, for example, Yugoslavia, they're technically one people, but just with different ethnic groups, and that have always been there, that have lived side by side. In China, back in 1949, depending on who you get which resource that you source from, the Chinese population was barely a percent, maybe 2%, maybe even less than. I'm not sure exactly, depending on who you go
I I
for.
I read the statistic from U.S. very scholarly report on
Mm,
Xinjiang, right?
yeah,
James Millward, he's a
yeah,
very respected Xinjiang
yeah,
scholar. He often spoke, in support of the Uyghur cause. So I think he can be pretty
yeah,
reliable. According
yeah.
to him, the Han population in Xinjiang in 1949 is between 6 to 9%.
Okay, so let's just say that's the case. I'm not sure. I can't say either or.
Mhm.
Um, let's just say that's the case. That means these Chinese were accepted by the Uyghur or East Turkestani government. And if you were to track the family line of those individuals, that could be a case for those people to stay. But as for the people that came in during China's occupation, that Uyghurs did not give permission for, then they would not have a right to stay there because they came in what we label as China's occupation, the
W-
occupation period.
when do you date the China's occupation from? Like, we start.
1949, if I'm not mistaken, 1949, October the 1st.
Okay,
And
so
yeah,
that would be the People's Republic of China's
yeah,
incorporation of Xinjiang
yeah.
as part of its territory. Now, but what about before 1949? Xinjiang was still recognized as part of the Chinese territory, though. Like,
Mm,
even after the Qin dynasty. So and you talk about this before. About the Qin dynasty conquest in 1760, and then there was a Donggan rebellion in 1864. But there was a Qin dynasty reconquest in 1877.
mm,
Right. Since then, Xinjiang has been basically governed as a province of China, and even just throughout the Republican period, even before 1949, Xinjiang was ruled by various Chinese warlords or government that's pledged their allegiance to the nationalist government under Chiang Kai-shek. And as you mentioned about the establishment of the second East Turkestan government from 1944 to 1949. So that government was actually supported by the Soviet Union. They occupied the northern part of Xinjiang. Xinjiang was essentially divided, right, between a small portion in the northern half where it was governed by the East Turkestan government, and then the southern half, including Urumqi, was still governed by the nationalists, right? And in 1949, the nationalist garrison surrendered, and the also remember the people who governed the East Turkestan Republic, they were Uyghur communists, right? It was led by Uyghur communists, and the Uyghur communists, they approached Mao's government. They agreed to be part of People's Republic of China. So there was no conflict between, say, there was no military conflict between the East Turkestan government with People's Republic of China. They just agreed to be incorporated, to be part of People's Republic of China. In fact, if you look at one of the leaders who was responsible for establishment of the Second East Turkestan Republic, Saifuddin, right? He appeared on the Tiananmen Gate with Mao on the announcement of establishment of PRC on October 1st, 1949.
Yeah, so the Uyghurs don't see Saifuddin Azizi as, we see him as a sellout. But at the same time, some people see him as, well, that was a political arena at the time and he did what he could. And we believe that the only reason why we got, at least on paper, autonomy was because they didn't want to see another revolt from Uyghurs establishing a third, just like a random state. So even if, I think it'll be very difficult to track those people with those family ties back then. So I don't speak on behalf of Uyghur people, but in my mind, I would imagine that if people could prove their bloodline back to those people that were accepted by Uyghurs, whatever government there was, they could potentially stay. But as for everyone else, because we like I said, majority of Uyghurs see Saifuddin Azizi as a sellout, as the enemy, so to speak. And so we would not accept his, judgment on this. But yeah, any other Chinese that came during PLA, and because you got to imagine, could Chinese migrants migrate to East Turkestan without PLA? They couldn't. So they wouldn't be able to unless they went through the normal legal route, going to an Uyghur government, a hypothetical Uyghur government back then, getting a visa, getting residence permit. If you could track those people, then for sure, I would imagine that they could stay, but the vast majority wouldn't be able to stay.
But there was no like a Uyghur government except for that 3 years, right? Except for 1944 to 1949, in a very limited part of Xinjiang, in the Ili Valley, right? That's 3 northern districts. And for the longest time, Xinjiang was ruled by the Qin dynasty, during which time I need to remind you that the original homeland of Uyghurs are mostly south of the Tianshan Mountains, right, in the Tarim Basin area. It was the Qin dynasty and the Zhuangars. They brought Uyghurs to north of Xinjiang, to northern Xinjiang to settle. At the same time, they brought in the Han Chinese, the Hui, and then the others. And well, let's leave the Han Chinese for a moment, right? What about the other non-Muslim population in Xinjiang? Like, let's say the Mongols, right? They're indigenous. They've been indigenous in Xinjiang for thousands of years. What about them?
To be honest, I am not knowledgeable in the demographic history of the land, so I can't comment one way or the other. But whoever the government is, they would make the choice as to who stays and who goes, and whatever needs to be set up for a safe passage or safe exodus out. I couldn't speak, and now I call for a democratic secular sort of state, but maybe the Uyghurs who are calling for an Islamic state wouldn't even want me there, or the likes of me calling for, a free society where people who want to practice or not practice, drink or not drink, be gay, straight, be, a Christian, a Muslim, so people could live freely. Maybe they wouldn't let me in for having this sort of ideology as well. So I couldn't talk about all the other hypotheticals.
Sure, sure. Let's not talk about others. Let's just talk about you, your own personal view,
Yeah.
right? But
So,
you
so
would
my own personal, so if it was my own personal view, based on the political reality of the world, what what most likely could be happening is that the Chinese who do decide to remain there would become East Turkestani citizens along with everybody else, and live according to whatever government, whatever democratic secular government is there. This is the most realistic. Um, an exodus of millions of Chinese that don't want to leave doesn't seem, especially if they're forced, doesn't seem realistic. So I'm not going to say in my mind this is what I want. I'm saying based on the political arena right now, that seems to be the most realistic in a hypothetical Uyghur state.
So let's talk about realistically, right? You are probably aware realistically, Chinese government is never going to let Xinjiang
Yeah,
go. That
yeah.
they, it's very whatever Chinese government is doing right now. You can be argued that they want Xinjiang to be part of the Chinese territory. That's why they're doing what they can. Whatever thing you think that the ultimate motivation is making sure Xinjiang remain part of PRC, right?
Yeah.
And at this point, Chinese government is still going pretty strong. So what do you think? How are you going to achieve your dream of freedom for your people? I mean, according to you, how would you achieve your dream of East Turkestan?
So right now we spoke about a hypothetical Uyghur state, and if that were to, after its establishment, what could happen, or the reality of what could happen. But in reality, um, as you mentioned, it's I don't see the Chinese Communist Party dissolving uh, in the next, not in the near future at least. And based on how the Uyghur situation on the outside, and based on and where we agree with each other, that the US uses all these issues just to make their own trade deals, because in all honesty, if Trump got what he wanted, he wouldn't have signed the Uyghur rights bill, and that's a fact. And God knows what's going to happen after November. So in reality, the a state actually coming into fruition is not a reality, and I do get a lot of hate for this from my own Uyghurs for saying this, but you got to be real sometimes. But it doesn't stop me from advocating or fighting for one.
Yeah, that's fair. What So what is your future plan? I mean, like right now, are you a full-time activist?
No, I work full time. I'm a high school teacher, and I do this part time. Not even part time, whenever I can. So yeah. So these stories, I'm being funded from this government or that government, is totally untrue. I work away from my family just to make ends meet, and so yeah.
Oh, so your family is still in Turkey, right? And
Yeah, so
you're
I'm in Turkey right now, but I need to be back in Bahrain to work. I can't book flights. I'm having issues with those, but I work away from my family just to make ends meet.
sure, sure. Okay. Well, I mean, hopefully we have a very fruitful exchange. I
Yeah.
wanted to understand your point of view, and I think your view probably represent at least a portion of the Uyghur in exile in terms of how they think about their situation.
Yeah.
In fact, let me ask you, what percentage of Uyghurs do you think that agree with you in terms of
I would hope a lot, because I'm coming at from a Western point of view as well. The majority of Uyghurs do not want, um, like especially the ones I've talked to, the feeling I get is not to call for a democratic secular state. the reality is they mostly want a sort of Islamic state setup, and I tell them that that's not real. You know, it's not going to happen. No one's going to allow an Islamic state in the middle of Central Asia, or a Turkic state in the middle of Central Asia. But the even though my voice is prominent in the Western world, this idea is, population-wise, is not that wide. Even though a lot of the main organizations, the World Uyghur Congress calls for the similar ideology I call for, Uyghur Human Rights Project, Uyghur American Association, but the populace, the main populace, don't live in Europe or America. They live in Turkey, and they live in the Middle East or Central Asia or Kazakhstan, and their ideologies are slightly different than mine.
Yeah, I know there's actually there have been reports in Associated Press about thousands of Uyghurs traveling to Syria to fight in the Syria war. Don't you think that don't you think that lends support to the Chinese government's claim of fighting radicalism and terrorism? The fact that there were thousands of Uyghurs fighting in Syria under the banner, in close association with Al Qaeda.
Well, you had Australian fighters go, you had Americans go, Belgians go, English go. You had people from all over the world going to Syria, but you don't see those governments clamping down on 5-10%, putting 5-10% of their Muslim populations into camps. And if we were to take the Chinese statistics on the Uyghur population, 11 million, according to Chinese statistics, there is anywhere around 5,000-6,000 Uyghur fighters that went there. So I worked it out to be like 0.00425%, something like this. So less than 0.001% of the Uyghur population got, being terrorists, but yet you're going to lock up, what we say millions, and then persecute people in an open air prison with this high technology, persecuting the rest of the Uyghurs for the acts of a few. So I would be happy to, catch terrorists for China, if I had the means. But I'm saying, if you're going to lock up let's just say I'm a murderer, I murder someone here, doesn't mean you're going to lock up my mom, my dad, my parents back home. They have nothing to do with me. Do you see in the West, like, someone kills someone, but do you see their whole family locked up? So this is, I would make the case, like, catch the murderer, catch the terrorist. Don't lock up, innocent people that don't even know. If you ask them like a simple foundation rule or a law about Islam, they wouldn't even be able to answer you. So no, I don't think that's a good reason.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Probably many people in Xinjiang does not have a strong foundational knowledge of Islam. But it goes back to my question to you.
No. But do you know why they don't have a strong foundation?
Because Xinjiang's story is very similar to the former Soviet republics in Central Asia, the stand countries, right? There has been Xinjiang has also been very strongly influenced by Soviet Union since 1900s, and in the Soviet Union, the Soviet Central Asia became strongly secular due to the policies of USSR, and Chinese government adopted very similar policy in Xinjiang. They pretty much adopted the policy they got from Soviet Union, right? So for longest time, Xinjiang, in terms of secularity, was I say comparable to neighboring countries like Soviet Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, etc. Right, but that started to change after 1990, right? With the end of Afghan war with the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the religiosity is coming back, right? So religiosity, and there's also some a small number of Uyghurs who had participated in Afghan war as mujahideens coming back to Xinjiang and spread their own ideology underground because they didn't believe that the Islam that was preached in the state-sanctioned mosque in Xinjiang to be legitimate, right? And I think you talked about this before at some point or is it that you didn't believe that the Islam preached in the mosque? Oh, no, you did talk about that. You say it's like communist version of Islam, right? So
Yes.
so that's why I think what a lot happened in China in the last 3 years. It's a reaction to the kind of societal changes within Xinjiang in the last 30 years. After 1990, there's a group of Uyghur people traveling to the outside world. They're bringing back, they're getting in touch with different strands of Islam, and they're bringing it back to Xinjiang itself. And some of them claim that the Islam that's been preached in the mosque in Xinjiang is not the true Islam, right? They're bringing back the true Islam, and they get a lot of they actually get a lot of grassroots report. There's the support. There's been I think that's what the Chinese government is afraid of, is this kind of the underground proselytizing of the Islam that was brought in from Afghanistan, from the outside, and it may be an overreaction, but that is a context for what the Chinese government has been doing since 2017, especially after. So let me ask you something else. You brought up Urumqi riot in 2009. Can you tell me what is your version of the events that happened in 2009?
Yeah, before we get to that, I want to talk about the preachers. So China locks up Uyghur imams that were sanctioned by the state, but and they were always, who had worked for the Chinese government, but they would actually be preaching pretty much the truth, the real Islam, for the most part. And so when you had moderate Islamic voices being locked up, that was not enough. Even moderate Islamic voices, moderate imams, moderate scholars, they too were locked up. And those were the only people that could deal with extremism. So we have Islamic, I don't like using the term Islamic extremism, but there is extremism everywhere. And the only people that can tackle this extremism and show the layman, the people, that idea is extreme, this idea is okay, are moderate Muslims, moderate Islamic voices. So when China locked those people up, then you could actually, because I've attended Friday sermons in Urumqi, and I know my religion, and it was clearly communist. Like the messages, like they would use like one half of a verse and not say the other half, because the other half wouldn't match with communist values. So when this happened, people boycotted the mosques altogether. Now, if you read and if the similarities between extremists and the extreme right-wing zealots who hate Islam, the thing that they have in common is that when they open the Quran and they miscontextualize verses, they actually agree upon the same thing. That they both agree that the extremists, the Islamic extremists, and the ultra-right wing believe that Muslims want to kill non-Muslims, and that they have the right to kill innocent civilians. And a moderate voice, that the true message of Islam does not call for that at all. So China brought upon extremism upon itself because they locked up those moderate voices.
So who are the imams that currently teaching in the mosque in Xinjiang? Like for
So
example, the Urumqi mosque you went to.
yeah, so when I went there, those people were it was very communist based. It was and when they referred to the verses or they referred to the hadiths that they were, I knew the verses, I knew what they were going to say, but they would chop up the verses or they would give a they would make it in a way that they praise communism and all. It was very propaganda, and many countries do this. Even this does happen even in Turkey, but not to the extent where these guys are like, you know, the stuff that they call for, and we
Can you
lost
give
all
an
those.
example? Can you give an example where they, you know, how they distorted the message or they left something out?
Yeah. So, for example, causing ethnic harmony, right? We should be living and breathing and harmonizing with everyone, meaning the Han Chinese. Um, but and that's a good message. But they were pushing for that, the forcing. So there's a situation where Hans and Uyghurs, they're relatives now. You are set up with a partner, opposite sex, and you are basically like a cultural exchange, but you are forced to do this. Now, where like I've mingled with and I've given da'wah, I've called people, I've propagated Islam in East Turkestan to Chinese people, and I was able to, convince one person that Islam is the truth. But for what was happening there was they were forcing this was calling people to accept the government policy where Chinese people have to come into your homes, and if you and what happens is they won't say this publicly. They go, you know, give into what the Chinese. They don't say that. They request it from you. Do this. This will make you a good Muslim. But the underlying subliminal message, everyone know. I'm not. We're not just interpreting for ourselves. Everyone knows that this is policy. So a lot of
So
the policies will.
this was in 2014 that you heard this message in the Urumqi Mosque.
Yes, one of the messages. But
I,
it took a few years for them to actually implement it.
okay, so in 2014 they're already saying take Han Chinese into your home.
No, they would be do your very best to not create tension, be one with your neighbors and things like this. And
Okay,
slowly the messages got tougher and tougher. It was all a lead up.
but how is that differ from like the true Islamic teaching?
Because it is not like if you left Uyghurs and Chinese on their own, they would never intermingle, and that was a big problem for the Chinese. It's not like all Uyghurs were like that, but the majority of Uyghurs did not intermingle with Chinese. Very, very different. It was, um, and, and it's the Uyghurs know and the Chinese know. They know that they are occupying. The Uyghurs know that they are being occupied, and it's the elephant in the room which no one can talk about.
Is that I mean is that why do you think that they don't intermingle like the Uyghurs and the Han Chinese?
Because Uyghurs' lands are being taken over. Every time they have an interaction with Chinese and the Chinese know that the government's behind them, a Uyghur person cannot forget a government official, utter any sort of negativity or complain about a Chinese neighbor because they themselves would be persecuted. They know, like, it's an open apartheid. On paper, everyone's equal, but when it comes to the enactment of policy, the Uyghurs, when it comes to studying or jobs, so throughout their life, Uyghurs are treated as second and third class citizens. Even though this is not shown to the world this way, in general life, this is what you see. When you have to pay thousands of dollars just to get a passport, my family, my wife, they paid anywhere between 5 to 10,000 US dollars just to get a passport. When you see constantly this treatment happening, there is this general resentment between the two groups, and then the general Chinese population buy into what's been said on the media, so they see us as terrorists, and the Uyghurs see them as taking over, and they get all the benefits, and because um, the the Chinese are very rich in, the Uyghurs, their land is very rich in minerals, and we just see the resources and money, jobs and opportunities go to these people, go to people coming in from the inner land.
But aren't there also wealthy Uyghurs, middle class Uyghur, and well-to-do Uyghurs? You mentioned some of them are being locked up right now, as you mentioned in the very beginning of the show. So there
So
are.
yeah, so as you mentioned, the Uyghur opera singer, some are propped up so that it makes like there will be one or two or three Uyghurs propped up in this manner to make it not look as bad. But the
But
others, the majority, they won't. This is the notion.
But according to you, your own father-in-law, he was, well-to-do, right? Before
Yeah,
this latest, 2017
yeah,
tightening. So,
yeah,
so there are people like him that,
yeah.
profited or become part of the system and benefited from it, right?
I agree. I agree. So that's what I'm saying. Just because you prop up some, it doesn't make it the norm for everyone. Um, so sometimes, like even before all this, right? Say my experiences, say 10 years ago, I too wouldn't believe many Uyghurs because I'm like, well, hold on, the people that I hang out with, because to be honest, regardless of the elite status of my father-in-law, generally my own family in Australia had many connections with the elites, and I too, when I was younger, I thought that was the norm. But after going to other areas and talking to other Uyghurs from different classes, I've most of them know that that wasn't the situation. Yeah. So it was basically what I was shown.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, I mean, what do you envision? Your activism. What do you see? What the future would be? Short term,
Um,
long term.
yeah, like even though like we agree that America is like not the right country to be doing this because of their own past atrocities, but I do believe that if America did not step in the way that it stepped in, the situation would have been far worse. Because at the end of the day, according to Xinjiang authorities, that they say the camps no longer exist. I mean, even statements like that, even though we don't believe them, and they deny the use of forced labor camps and torture and rape and sterile and all these atrocities, at least because the Chinese authorities generally would refuse to answer these questions and give no response, but at least we got them on the back foot, like them having to come up with propaganda campaigns, making work CGT and overtime, telling the world in their white paper that the Uyghurs are not Turks. Are the
Yeah,
Uyghurs
that is
Turks?
ridiculous. I mean, I agree.
Right?
The Chinese propaganda can be very heavy-handed and it's
Right?
ridiculous. The
So,
part,
so yeah, so at least we've got China answering these things one way or another. And I do believe at least the US is slowing down this potential genocide um, that is to come. And I do worry that if the Uyghurs are not free in one way or another, that we will eventually disappear. And yeah, and like I said, the reality of an independent state is very, very slim, but it doesn't stop people like me from not fighting for it because we have no other choice but to do so.
when you say Uyghur disappearing as a people, you mean physically disappear?
Yes, it could be physical because at any given time, I was watching a documentary on Rwanda yesterday. At any given time, that could happen. I mean, and there's really nothing to stop the Chinese from doing it. Like to be honest, that like the sophistication of their weapons, and Uyghurs don't have weapons. They could if they wanted, right? And that could happen at any time. But at the same time, the Chinese are more sophisticated than the Germans because the Chinese have been able to find a way to profit, you know, whether or not people believe this, whether it be the organs or forced labor camps, whether it be the hair, these indigenous tribes out there, when they hunt down an animal, they use every part of the animal. They use the meat, they use the fur, they use the horns for weapons or whatever. So that's what we feel like, that they're profiting.
So you do believe the allegation about organ harvesting and selling of the Uyghur prisoners' organs, right?
Yeah, I do believe that. Yes.
Okay. Like how do you go about verifying such claims?
So we have a doctor by the name of Enver Tohti based in London. He was the first Uyghur surgeon in East Turkestan to carry out such a transplant on a half-executed man. And he describes this quite clearly in his testimony. And there is a video of a hospital, I believe in Beijing, called Tongshan Hospital. And, we talk about the religious persecution of not being able to go to mosques or eating halal food. And this mosque in the middle of Beijing had, a Muslim canteen. It was like set up, and they had a mosque within hospital grounds, and you had Middle Easterners like, what are you doing in China? And the images in Kashgar airport where they had, these fast transit lanes transporting organs. And, in Uyghur culture, and I'm sure in similar to Han culture, that organ transplantation, even like donating like voluntarily, is not a thing. So what's happening in Kashgar? Why have you got a transit lane specifically there? How many organs are coming out from there?
What do you mean, like a transit lane?
Yeah, so like a fast, sometimes in airports there's a fast track lane for airline personnel or diplomats.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There was a fast track lane arrow where it said in the Uyghur and Chinese language. It's you can find it on social media. It's like a green arrow, where specifically for organ transplantation.
You have this in video
in social media in Kashgar airport. This is visible.
Okay, you have this on video and images.
Yeah. You can find it. I can share it with you. It's all over social media. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's been verified as well. So.
Yeah. So you brought up the Dr. Enver Tohti, right? And
yeah.
I actually found a tweet from him from March 21st, 2019. And this is what he said. He said, "To whom it may concern, due to the emotional nature of our people, that the halal organ turned out to be a hoax, resulting in inappropriate common criticism made by me." So it looks like he just disclaim it on social media. This was from a year ago.
Now, I'll tell you the chronological order of what happened. He said that he talked about halal organ harvesting on Radio Free China.
Mm-hmm.
Then I don't know how many days passed, but then he refuted. He basically wrote that tweet.
Yep.
I went on a podcast with CJ Werleman, who later interviewed Enver Tohti, and he showed me that tweet. Later, CJ Werleman talked to Enver Tohti, convinced him to interview him, and said basically he feared. Enver Tohti later told CJ that he feared for his family's safety. That's why he made that tweet. And after that tweet, he's gone back into saying, yes, halal organ. He doesn't have hardcore proof, but from his experiences and from whatever information that he's gotten, he believes that this is taking place. So that tweet is, I'm not sure if he's taken down that tweet or not.
It's still there. I just searched.
It's still there, yeah. But he wrote that tweet, and later on, still after meeting CJ Werleman a few times, he was confident in using this term. And there was another woman who talked on a show.
CJ Werleman convinced him about this, give him more confidence.
Not convinced, gave him the confidence to do so.
Okay.
Because it
Okay.
was there. He feared something, and yeah, there was a fear. It wasn't about the information is true or not. He feared for his family's safety back home. That's yeah.
Okay. But for my audience out there, the tweet is still out there.
Yeah,
I can link to it.
yeah,
And so that's for me. That's one of the inconsistencies that I
yeah,
personally noticed.
yeah.
Okay. I mean, because for a long time there have been claims about organ harvesting by the Chinese state. Uh,
Mm,
it was made originally by the Falun Gong followers, and I believe Enver Tohti is also have some association with a Falun Gong organization, but it's true that in China there was prisoner like the executed prisoners organ was being used from 1980s up to 2000. So in 2000, I believe it's 2014. Actually, the Chinese law specifically prohibited harvesting organs from executed prisoners because it set up a very wrong incentive. Basically, you possibly you can lead to corruption, and where the doctors can collude with the courts to speed up execution in order to generate organs. So that, at least on paper, that's outlawed since 2014. I just wanted to put it out there for our audience. And then there's also the Chinese government did claim last summer, that they have closed down all the re-education camps and all the camps are closed. So do you have evidence that there are still people in the camps to contradict?
yes, yes. Because a lot of my friends and family, and even myself, even though my father-in-law is out, he cannot contact. I know he's out. You know how I know he's out? Because he's a
Ah,
famous person, and people posted billion videos of him.
mm,
And I have many friends. They've received news that their parents or loved ones have received prison sentences now. So, in a way, the China could be right that they've closed all the camps and they've just moved and they've just sentenced people to long-term hefty. So we could make that argument because a lot of my friends cannot contact their own parents to this day.
okay. I mean, conceivably, this program was set up where they funnel people to the re-education camps, and they separate out some people they feel that needs to giving out present sentence, whereas others could be released to the wider society.
Mm.
Again,
Yeah,
we don't have
yeah, yeah,
exact.
but these people I'm talking about, again, a lot of these people that are taken are not some like unemployed youth. They were like thriving in their careers. They were loyally working for the CCP for upwards 20, 30, 40 years, working in the hospitals, deans of deans of universities, professors. These people we're talking about that still haven't showed up.
So why though? I mean, what? I mean, I still can't logically.
I know
It doesn't
exactly,
compute. It doesn't compute. I
exactly.
mean, like, I can understand why. If we're talking about like a planned genocide, like Holocaust, right? You just lock up people in the concentration camp. You don't let them ever go out, and then you kill them like what the Nazis did. But what we have seen is that the Chinese government have been putting people in detention and then release them after a certain period of time. That's why we're getting a lot of testimonials from people who claim they have been to these camp and later released. That's how we're getting the testimonials in Uyghur people in Kazakhstan, in Turkey, right? So why do Chinese government do this? Why do they detain people for like 10, 12 months and just release them?
Um, Again, I really don't know. I don't even know why my father-in-law was released. I don't know why he was detained. The I've interviewed a former detainee, Gulbaha Jalilova, a Kazakhstani citizen, born and raised in Kazakhstan, never had Chinese ID, She was locked up for 15 months. They made her, and she showed me the photocopies of her Chinese ID. So God knows. I mean, would you be able to find out? I don't know. I don't know
So
why my
why
father
does she have
or
a Chinese
others.
ID? Why does
Yeah,
she have?
they gave her Chinese identification. They said she's a Chinese citizen. This is what she told me, and she went in there for 15 months, hasn't been charged to this day, and wasn't given any compensation for her detainment. I mean, and this is a Kazakhstani citizen, and to this day, according to our numbers, there are currently 220 Turkish citizens with who are Uyghur, who are ethnically Uyghur, still in detainment.
Mm. And the Turkish government hasn't made any complaints to China?
I'm not sure if they're doing anything under the table or privately, but publicly, no.
Why do you think like many Muslim countries have not come out to accuse China?
Well, first we have to. I don't like to use the word Muslim countries. I like to use the
Muslim
term
majority countries.
Muslim
Yeah.
majority countries because the leaders, if they were Muslim, like or following, you know, they would be sticking up for Muslim rights. And look at how a lot of these countries don't even stick up for Palestinians or Yemenis or Kashmiris or Rohingyans. So we're not the only ones.
Well,
Um, and and
the
and and,
many,
and
at least I understand what you're saying, but at least many Muslim majority country, at least that make a public showing of support to the Palestinian rights. I mean, they may not do anything in actuality, but they do make a public show of support. Why do you think they didn't do the same thing for Uyghurs?
no, I don't recall any Muslim leader make a public show of support. There are Muslims that do it.
Erdogan, Erdogan from Turkey.
Erdogan's one, right? Have you been following what's been happening with the UAE?
Oh well, that UAE doesn't count because UAE is just a US
No, 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 no,
US.
no, 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 no. But did you see what Turkey did because of the UAE? Turkey said that they are thinking about cutting their diplomatic ties, whether it be closing their consulates in embassies in the UAE
Yeah,
because of the diplomatic relations that it's doing with Israel.
yeah,
But Turkey has diplomatic and economic relations with Israel.
sure.
So Erdogan's all talk, man. If he was real, he would be cutting his ties with Israel.
Of course, but at least publicly, he does make he does oftentimes give speech against Israel, right?
No,
In
yep,
public
yep, yeah, but
statements.
do you know why? It's for votes because the people, again, it's the people.
Of course.
Because attacking Israel, right? You Zionist bastards. This phrase, right, is very popular amongst Muslims in Turkey. This is why he does it. So, for example, if that same sort of sensitivity was felt by the majority of Turkish people, all right, and the reason why it's not felt because Turkey censors a lot of the news that comes about the Uyghurs. So we don't get that same amount of support. So if the Uyghur situation made a difference in the votes in Turkey, of course they'd be talking about it. So Turkey is a one-off. Turkey used to talk about the Uyghur situation, but because Turkey has cut its ties with the US and the West economically, they've had to latch on to Russia and China for just to stay
But
above board.
But there are plenty of Gulf countries that have very close tie with United States. We have Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia. And we don't have these people coming out and condemning China over Uyghur. Why is that?
Again, these Muslim so-called leaders are not, they are not real Muslim leaders. I'm not going to say whether they're Muslim or not, but they're not. They don't follow they don't stand up or follow Muslim rights. And in 2012, in 2013 especially, China made big deals with these countries, multi-billion dollar deals, especially with Saudi Arabia. And so that relationship was, brought together back then. And after they got their support, it was much easier to carry out what they're carrying out with their silence. I mean,
So,
Pakistan, yeah.
so
So
why do you think that, the only countries in the world that's currently condemning China over Xinjiang right now are Western countries, primarily US and European countries and Australia, New Zealand, etc.
I think you and I both know the answer to that. And I'm not going to shy away from saying that because everyone wants their 5-10% from China. That's the main reason. And yes, human rights does play a role, but the main reason is money, man. So the same reason why the West sticks up for, generally speaking, why the West sticks up for Uyghurs is for money, and why the Muslim world is silent on the Uyghur issue is also for money.
But how is West profiting from? I mean, how do they gain money by condemning China over Uyghur? Because that doesn't make sense. Wouldn't they just make more?
Well, the West only started to condemn China when China wasn't signing their trade deals.
So you think it's
Yeah,
related to the Trump
yeah.
trade deal?
So when China didn't sign the U.S. trade deal or the other dealings that they had within Australia or other countries, well, okay, this gives me a reason to now speak up against you. And they're obviously pressured by other other NGOs as well. But the main reason that a lot of even Uyghurs don't even want to deal with is it's all about money from both sides.
Okay.
So those that support, it's about money, and those that don't support, it's about money.
So I mean, you're pretty clear-eyed about why the West support the Uyghur
Yep.
cause right now. What do you see? What do you hope to achieve with your activism?
I hope at least for my part, we get to a stage where people can just live like there are actually no more camps. People can be given their passports. I can travel. They can come. Like back to normal, like a sort of normalcy. Like the best thing I hope for. Obviously, I'm not going to stop fighting for independence, but the best thing I can hope for that could happen is, what China is propagating right now, saying everything's back to normal. If that actually were reality.
So you
So
would, your goal is Uyghur inside China enjoy equal rights, right? I mean, I know your eventual goal is independence,
yeah,
but with just for immediate short-term goal,
yeah.
you would be for Uyghur people inside China having full citizen rights inside China.
Yeah. So you know how you said you don't believe in the Chinese propaganda,
Hmm.
right? CGTN, like all the CGTN propaganda, if that were actually true, you know what I mean? Like that would be okay for the time being. That like no camps, people like really like the idea that really extreme people are actually being cured from extremism. If all these things were true, I'd accept that for the time being.
Okay. Okay. I think that's fair. And I have you here for over almost 2 hours now, and I really appreciate you
So
coming to my show and giving your side of the story.
yeah,
And I'm sure I'll see you on social media again because you're very active.
yeah,
So I think I understand a little better now where you're coming from,
yeah,
what drives you, what are your motivations, and this is like I said before, I'm always welcome different voices, different political opinions. So thank you again, Arslan, for coming to Silk and Steel podcast to give this talk.
you're welcome, mate.
Okay, I'll talk to you soon back on Twitter.
Okay.
Okay, bye. Bye bye.
Okay, bye.